Good morning. My name is Hester Manheimer. I'm the mayor of the city of Asheville, and I'd like to welcome you to the July 24th, 2025 agenda briefing work session. All council members and staff are participating virtually. The meeting will be live streamed on the city's YouTube channel or through the city's virtual engagement hub, accessible through the front page of the city's website. You may listen to the meeting via phone at 855-925-2801 with meeting code 1229. And as with all of our agenda review briefing sessions, we will not take public comment. Interim Assistant City Manager Jade Dundas, Council Member Shanika Smith, and Council Member Maggie Ullman are not able to join us today. For those of you joining us today, council and staff, please unmute yourselves and say a quick hello when I call your name. Vice Mayor Antoinette Mosley.
Good morning.
Council Member Sage Turner.
Good morning.
Council Member Kim Roney.
Good morning.
Council Member Bo Hess.
Good morning.
City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
City Attorney Brad Branham.
Good morning.
City Clerk Maggie Burleson.
Good morning.
And I have a message here from Maggie Ullman that she is trying to join us by phone. Councilmember Maggie Ullman, are you there? Well, not sure, but maybe. Okay. So now I'm going to turn it over to the City Manager, Deborah Campbell.
Thanks, Mayor. And again, good morning, everyone. As you know, the council agenda briefing meetings are designed to help you prepare for your upcoming business meetings. Your next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, July the 29th. The meeting will start at 5 p.m. and will be held in the council chamber located on the second floor of City Hall. As a reminder, you all have a closed session, both following your meeting today at 1 o'clock and another one on July 29th before your regularly scheduled business meeting at 4 o'clock p.m. So the run of show for today's meeting will start with a review of items on your business meeting that's scheduled again on July 29th. We are anticipating this meeting will likely be a long one due to the number of items on the consent agenda, manager updates, and the two relatively controversial rezoning petition public hearings. Interim Assistant City Manager Ben Woody will provide an overview of that business agenda item. He will also then review upcoming council committee meetings, and I will join him in that discussion. And then we'll close out with a few upcoming items scheduled on your 8-week agenda in terms of his role. Then lastly, the last agenda item is on the updates and issues section of the agenda. We have some representatives with the firm Jarrett Walker and Associates, and they will provide an update on the comprehensive transit operation assessment. And I see that Jessica Morris is here, and I'm sure she will probably do some introductory comments. I'll now turn it over to Ben Woody, Assistant City Manager, to review the first item on this agenda, which is your July 29th business agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Appreciate it. And good morning again, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. Do have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to move relatively quickly, but please stop me if you have any questions or want to discuss any items. So as Ms. Campbell mentioned, we will start next Tuesday at 4 p.m. with a closed session. When we move into our regular meeting, we have one proclamation scheduled. July 2025 is Independent Retailer Month, so we'll do that proclamation. Our consent agenda is fairly dense for this meeting. And again, I'm going to cover a few items that I want to highlight, but of course we can always stop and discuss or cover other items if you'd like to. So I'll begin with some good news, and that is items B and C. These two consent agenda items authorize resolutions to move forward for the design work for the Walton Street Park Improvements project, as well as the Oakley Fire Station new construction project. And what makes this good news and why it's significant is both of these projects will be funded through our 2024 agenda items. So I'm going to package these. D through G are resolutions that continue to advance our water system recovery projects at North Fork and the Bee Tree reservoirs. Two of these items sustain the emergency protective pre-treatment systems at each reservoir, and that is maintaining those until permanent repairs are underway. And the other three items are related to advancing the design of those permanent pretreatment systems at both of the reservoirs. And then finally, one of the contracts also advances the design and reconstruction of the fuse gate system at North Fork, which was damaged but functioned as intended during Hurricane Helene. All these projects have applied for funding through the FEMA PA program. And again, water is one of our #1 recovery priorities, and we continue to advance these projects. Item L, jump down to L, is a budget amendment that provides for the acceptance of $275,000 in grant funds for the Right at Home Homeless Prevention Initiative, which is through the Asheville Continuum of Care. You, council, previously authorized the submission and execution of this grant at your June 10th meeting. And with this consent item, you are now accepting those grant funds. Item M, this is another exciting item, is the first round of project submissions to the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program that the state administers, and we are sub-applicants through the state to that grant program. The HMGP program provides funds to communities following a natural disaster that allows those communities to implement long-term hazard mitigation measures. This first round of submissions includes 9 projects that, if all awarded, would amount to approximately $249 million in federal and state funding. The project list has been discussed before, but it's also available in the request form that's attached to this agenda. Item N is another recovery-related item. This resolution authorizes the design and engineering services to restore the front 9 holes of the municipal golf course. This is a contract that is a not-to-exceed contract, so it's a total of just over $1.5 million. And again, we expect this to be fully reimbursed by FEMA. So good news for the golfers in the community as we begin to see that project move forward as well. Item P authorizes the city to enter into an agreement with the AVL Unpaved Alliance to build, manage, and maintain natural surface trails at portions of the French Broad and Azalea Parks. This is a project that started pre-Helene, so this is something we've been working on for a while, and we're finally bringing forward an agreement to move 2 of the unpaved trails forward. Project's fully funded by AVL Unpaved and is supported by our GAT plan, which council adopted in 2022. Items Q and R are contract ratifications and an amendment that allows our debris services to continue while we're largely done with debris removal. There's still portions of debris removal that continue, and this allows us to keep prioritizing that effort. And then the last item I'm going to cover today is item S, which allows the roadside litter and hotspot control program, as well as our biohazardous waste program, to continue. Those programs and these contracts were originally funded in 2023 using ARPA funds. What these amendments do is allocate a combination of remaining ARPA funds and Public Works general funds to continue these litter control programs into FY26. That concludes my review. It was a lot of information, a lot of good news, I feel like. And so any questions from council or anything else we want to discuss? Seeing none, I'm going to keep moving. So we do have a manager's report scheduled for next week. We have 2 items under the manager's report. First, staff will provide an update on what to expect from the ULI Advisory Services Panel. That will be underway when you have your meeting next week, but we do have an opportunity just to share information about that process and what some of the expectations can be as we move through it. So again, we're really excited about having ULI here next week, and I know a lot of the members in the community are as well. And then finally, staff will share a proposed, excuse
Jen,
me,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. Could
Yeah.
we also remind them of the kickoff meeting on Sunday, the dinner?
Yeah, absolutely. So council, you will participate in a dinner on Sunday with ULI panel members. That is a social event, so not a business meeting. And then throughout the week, we'll have different opportunities, not only for council to participate in the process, but also for the community. Monday afternoon, we'll have a community meet and greet from 5 to 6:30 at Harris Cherokee Center. Panel members will be there along with key staff. So a great opportunity for council and the community to interact with the panel members. We'll have some engagement built into that process. And then we'll work, the panel works through the course of the week. And then Friday morning from 10 to 12, they will present their recommendations to the community. So again, really excited about that week. Looking forward to it and looking forward to seeing council participate in those activities as well. Second item on the manager's report is a staff proposed structure for establishing 4 Helene recovery boards, as well as for restarting advisory boards. So we'll have more information to share around that proposal with council and the community. Any questions on the manager's report? Councilwoman Roney.
Actually, if I can back up to the consent agenda, I thought we had originally budgeted 500,000 for the litter and cleanliness, and now it looks like that's up to 818,000. How much of that is from the remaining ARPA funds, and what does that leave us with? Is it like zeroing out the ARPA funds?
I believe it does, but and you're right, the original budget was 500, and we have added money over the course of this to continue this program. We do think it's had positive impact on the community. We will get back to you in the follow-up document with a little more detail around the ARPA funding percentages and what that looks like. So happy to provide that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving into public hearings, as Ms. Campbell said, you've got 2 rezoning public hearings that we do expect participation around, and Ms. Councilwoman Roney, I'll pause there and see if you have
sorry,
another question.
I forgot about the Helene recovery boards. I know that we're covering that in the manager's report. Are we also going to talk about the path forward for the remaining advisory boards? I think the existing advisory boards? Okay. Thank you.
Yes, we will cover both and make that staff's recommended proposal available to council and the community. Correct. Public hearing item A is a continuance from your June meeting, and what council asked is the applicant to provide additional information around the use of an adjoining right-of-way. So we expect the applicant to bring that information back to council at this meeting as requested. I am going to move to public hearing item B, and I'm going to share a screen on that. So I want to take a minute to familiarize. So this is a conditional zoning to allow the construction of 36 single-family detached housing units on property located off of Springside Road. So just want to orient council to the property so you can see on the lower end of the parcel in red is Springside Road, and that's where the primary access would come to this development. You can see it's a triangular piece of property that's primarily wooded, and based on the vicinity map, you can also see this is located in South Asheville. Real quick, I'm going to show, so remember that the orientation on that map was facing south. I'm going to show you the site plan when I talk through the rest of the request. And what I'll ask you to keep in mind on the site plan, it has a different orientation, of course. Always interesting why nobody uses true north on plans all the time, but that's what we're going to work through. So let me pull that up real quick. Okay. So what you have is a conditional zoning, and this is the site plan that's been submitted, and you can see it is a single family development. It's the road comes in off of Springside, and in this case, Springside is on the left of the map. So again, we've got a different orientation, but hopefully this kind of gives you a perspective of what the parcel looks like now and what the development's proposed to be. The principal purpose of this conditional zoning, because it's actually a rezoning from RS4 to conditional zoning RS4, so it keeps the same base district, but what it does is it is proposing to receive a number of technical modifications to the lot dimensions and the building setbacks. And so what that allows is basically an increase in the buildable project density. So this is going to have smaller lots and smaller setbacks than you would ordinarily see in a RS4 development. Any questions on this project or this development proposal? And of course, planning staff will be there and will provide much more detailed information than I have. Councilwoman Turner.
Thanks, Ben. I met with both the, I guess, legal team representing the client, the applicant, and the neighborhood group, and they have different drawings with a single entry street. But this is what, the last one that's on file with the city?
Correct. This is the drawing that we have on file from the applicant.
Okay.
So I know I have also seen some different drawings that have been put together by, I think, neighborhood groups or people that live in the proximity of this development. But what I showed on the screen is what we have is the official proposal at this time.
Additionally, I believe it was the applicant's legal team that let me know, and I'd love for some confirmation on our end, that this could be a by right 167 apartment multifamily structure. There was just a statement said in a meeting. I would just love some of that. Like, is that true? And
we have our planning director, Steph Dahl, on the call. We might be able to answer that now. I don't believe that multifamily is by right in RS4 zoning, but if Steph can confirm that, let's do that. If not, we can get back to you on that.
I'm going to along that. I want to chime in here along that same line. I've heard that if it was 3 houses less, it would be a by right project or some, so it'd be kind of interesting to know just what would be possible, generally speaking, by right versus what the applicant's asking for. Thanks, Steph. Sorry, go ahead.
And yeah, because one last piece of context, because what we're seeing here in RS4, like the minimum lot size is like 8,000 square feet, and there's an ask to cut it in more than half. And I guess I don't know how it could be 3 less by right because the setbacks are so different, but I'd love to just know what is. Thank you.
Hi, Steph Monson-Dahl, Planning Director for the City of Asheville. I'll say that, the answer to this is based on the design that you produce for the site. There is technically, you can't use a mathematical formula for any one piece of land and not consider that there might be streams on it, there might be setbacks that you have to do. You can't divide, you can't use the base of what, like someone says, RS4 allows and think that that's what you can actually produce. So I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that are producing other site plans that show what they think might be available by right. Staff has had this discussion, and I think council on Tuesday night, if you want to ask this question again, and we can also manage it in the follow-up document, we can give you some approximations of what we think could be built on this parcel with other alternate designs as a by right project.
So could you, Steph, respond to the question of the multifamily development, though? I think that was the initial.
We didn't even talk about multi-family, so I would have to take a look at that.
Is it a permitted use in this district?
They mentioned our corridor updates, if that helps. What we did.
Right. So I would want to speak to one of my senior planner. And so if you just give me a minute, I could check on that and you can maybe move on to another question. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph.
Councilwoman Roney.
Well, I see a planner with a hand up, Will Palmquist. Does Will need to go first before my question?
I'm happy to jump in and give some clarity to that question. I was researching it to confirm the question about multifamily in the RS4 district. So I can confirm that multifamily is not a permitted use in the RS4. So if they did rezone to a multifamily district, they could potentially get a lot of units on that site, but it's not currently zoned for that as it stands today.
Thank you, Will.
Hey folks, this is Councilwoman Ullman. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Hey everybody. I was wondering, just to triple check my understanding, I've been talking with the applicant and with neighbors, and have a lot of folk requested that this project be delayed to come to council because there's potential legal concerns with ownership of the property and just in general asking for more time. And it's not something council can decide, right? If the applicant has to decide if they want to come this week or if they want to delay. Is that right? Or can we just ask them if there was enough council to just push this back further?
Let's have Brad respond to that one.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Brad Branham, City Attorney. To answer Council Member Ullman's question first, if the applicant wishes to move forward, I do believe that we have enough information currently that council would need to go ahead and hear this matter. If council wishes to request that the applicant consider moving this date, that's certainly something you could do. With regard to the legal issue that is still pending, we are aware of that. We've been working closely with the attorney representing the developer in that matter. And what we have done is amended the proposed development ordinance that would potentially approve, if council so voted, the rezoning such that it would only be effective once the ownership issue is resolved. So essentially it's contingent upon that. And that allows council to go ahead and, if it so chooses, to make a decision without having to make a final determination about the ownership issue. I'm happy to discuss a little more why that was our proposed resolution. This is something that we believe we have sufficient information at this point to feel comfortable recommending that as a solution under the current circumstances.
Thank you.
Councilmember Roney.
So some of the questions that I'm hearing from the neighbors with concern for the future neighbors also is concerns around infrastructure for pedestrian safety. The estimate is close to 6,000 students within a mile of this location, the aquatic facility being in close proximity. I know there will be some sidewalk requirements for the project that's obviously part of the project, but it would help if I knew what the gap is between that sidewalk and where the sidewalk continues, because there's a gap, and then where that fits into our like sidewalk planning, because I think the argument for having mobility and accessibility options is a strong one, but it would help if I could respond to neighbors with that request and concern.
Stage.
I guess I also had a couple just questions procedurally. I understand Maggie may be absent for this meeting, and then I've been hearing questions been asked a lot about whether the mayor will be able to participate. So if we are down to 5, Brad, could you tell us what that means? And then I just want to share my sentiment that I'm more than supportive of a continuance if it means that the neighborhood or the applicant is able, has some tasks at hand and something is being worked on. If they have no intention to change anything, I don't know that it matters, but I do support the idea of a delay if it helps move things along or create a better project. I'll also agree with what Kim said. I did hear a lot about safety in this area, and I'd love an update of if it's even on our radar for sidewalks.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Councilmember Turner. To respond directly to the potential conflict of interest, the mayor and I have already had discussions about that. We are trying currently to track that down and to make a final determination in as advance as we possibly can of your meeting. So we do plan to have a final resolution on that one way or another if a recusal is necessary. If the mayor does need to be recused, or if any other member needs to be recused, with one member already being absent, there would still be 5 members who could vote. All votes to approve conditional rezonings require a minimum of 4 votes, regardless of who is present or who may be recused.
Mayor?
And I'm still sorting out the conflict issue. Our law firm does not represent the applicant developer, but we have been involved in the underlying lawsuit that involves the title issue to the property. And there's some other apparently complicating factors, including the fact that the attorney that I need to sort this out with is on vacation. So hopefully I'll know more, and I keep running this past Brad when I find out more information, and he gives me kind of his updated opinion. So we'll see where we land. I should know by early next week.
Great. Any other questions on public hearing item B?
The last question I'll have is, because we're seeing different drawings, if there are updated drawings that are part of this project, would those be included in the agenda documents that are uploaded, or could we expect there to be changes or updates during the council meeting?
And it was emailed to me, so I guess it is a public document if I need to forward it to someone.
You know,
I'm sorry.
Brad, I'm going to defer to you a little bit, but we obviously have drawings that are submitted and we use as a basis for our staff recommendation. Or Steph, Matt, I think that certainly the applicant can make revisions to those drawings. Is that correct, Brad? I mean, but at some point you've got to vote on a site plan that accompanies this conditional zoning. And obviously our job is to keep the most recent drawing or proposal or conditions in front of you for consideration. Brad, do you want to add
Thank you,
anything
Ben.
to that?
Just one thing, as council has seen many times, there is always the potentiality that an applicant will make changes either to conditions or even to the design elements of the proposed application. It is within council's authority to decide if any changes that have been made since this is reviewed by planning and zoning to refer it back to planning and zoning. Just as a suggestion, you don't have to do that. In many cases, council doesn't do that, but you have the ability to decide if you have enough information that you have had sufficient time to review the matter before making a decision. But one of your options, if significant changes have occurred, you do have the ability to get additional input from planning and zoning if you so choose.
Sage?
Well,
Councilmember Turner?
This is just an interesting aside. When I was meeting with the neighborhood, they were kind of pinpointing some of the things that they were hoping could change. And interestingly, they were things that either were, the applicant had changed or addressed as the result of a P&Z meeting and one member's particular input. So I just wonder, like, you know, we've got our volunteers viewing things and suggesting things, the applicant updating the drawings and the neighborhood not liking it. And I just wonder if that, you know, changes the dynamic a little. And then, you know, just to add that into the mix just to consider.
If I could ask planning staff, have we received any updated or revisions to the plan since planning and zoning?
This is Steph again, and I'm not aware of any revisions to the plan.
It's the new drawing. So it's the one that you'll see in the emails. It has different things like single lane, has micro units. It has a different retaining wall. It has just, you know, it removes those 3 lower lots. It adds in a superstructure stormwater system that has tanks that looks very expensive. And from what I understood, doesn't have a bid yet. So there's just, you know, this is why I mentioned a continuance or a delay may be helpful for all the parties, you know.
What I can offer is that when this went through Planning and Zoning Commission, there were recommendations that were made to improve the project. So I think I understand where you're coming from, Councilwoman Turner. I'd like for staff to take a look at this and just make sure that we can give you an accurate answer about if there are any proposed changes, whether or not they've been submitted through the development portal, and what you will exactly be voting on Tuesday night. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph.
Thanks, Steph. Brad?
Yes, thank you, Madam Manager. Just to add to that, Councilmember Turner, it's my understanding that the alternate map that you have seen is one that the developer produced in order to engage in some talks with the community about potential alternative designs. But at this point, they have not made any changes to their plan that has been submitted. Those were merely put together in order to explore options with the community. I don't believe that they've reached any kind of consensus. So as far as we stand today, you're still reviewing the original plan.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Brad and Steph, for that clarification, and keep an eye out on the follow-up document where staff will be able to address your questions today. Okay, that concludes review of your council agenda. So I'm going to move forward to the next part of our agenda, which is council committees. We do have council committee meetings, 3 of our committees meeting that we're going to review today. So I'm going to turn it over first to Ms. Campbell to review the Public Safety Committee agenda.
Thank you, Ben. We have a number of very interesting items on the Public Safety Committee meeting. We'll be meeting on July 31st at 11 o'clock, and this meeting will be virtual. And we have 2 items for information. And other than the approval of the minutes, we have another item that is recommended, hopefully a vote to move forward. And I'll just briefly go over those. The item after approval of minutes is the APD quarterly update, and Chief Lamb will be providing that information and considering some unfortunate things that have been happening in our community with regards to shootings. We definitely want to see if this is an unfortunate trend and if there are ways that we can prevent this trend from exacerbating. So that will be information sharing. The next item is expansion of the panhandling ordinance, high traffic zones, and Deputy Chief Sean Arteman will be presenting that. And this will be an action that we are recommending that the committee vote on to bring to full council. And I heard from the chair yesterday that he hopes it's in August and not September. If you have the agenda item open, it says August or September, but there's a strong desire to bring this forward in August. Again, responding to probably some of the information that Chief Lamb will be sharing with regards to the crime statistics. And then technology and public safety. And I know this has been of interest from both the community as well as council. And we'll be bringing you some information about launching a technology and intelligence division within Asheville Police Department and an expansion of the drone program. The number of other technologies that we are utilizing and haven't utilized because of the lack of resources that we have in terms of personnel. That will be for information sharing. And that, other than the public comment, that will conclude the items on our agenda for the Public Safety Committee.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. So I'll go ahead and move forward with the HCD committee meeting and the PEDE committee meeting. One caveat on both of those, and we'll talk about this more, is typically we would review those committee agendas at your first agenda briefing of the month. We don't have that in August. So we're reviewing these two quite about a month ahead of the actual meeting. So I'll just give the caveat that both of these agendas are still getting worked out. So they might look a little different when we get to the actual meetings. So with that, what I do know is the HCD meeting that's scheduled for July 30th, that's finalized. And what HCD will discuss at their July 30th meeting is the potential bond allocations to program categories. We're also going to talk about some ideas around joining or funding the Western North Carolina Affordable Housing Loan Fund, which is a collaborative among different funding agencies. So I would view this as another kind of good news item in the sense of this is already beginning the process of putting those 2024 affordable housing bond funds to work in the community. So this will kind of be the initial discussion at the HCD committee of what that may look like. Then moving on to the typical August meeting, on August 19th, HCD will meet at the regular time, and we got a couple items for that meeting. One is the Affordable Housing Division is going to provide a year-end affordable housing report to review monitoring and investments. I think public safety's done a great job of departments kind of giving regular reports on outcomes and what they've been working on. This is going to be a similar process that we're going to use in HCD. So at that meeting, Sasha Bertinsky and her staff will kind of review the FY25 affordable housing updates on city investments and review the monitoring process and results. So it'll be an opportunity to really see the outcome of your housing work for FY25. The next item at that meeting will be affordable housing bond recommendations. So we're going to introduce those bond funds and how they could be used at your July meeting, but we're going to ask the council committee at your August meeting to make recommendations to full council on the general funding areas for the affordable housing bond. Those recommendations will then move to full council, hopefully in September, to start putting those bond funds to use in the city of Asheville. Related to that also is a proposal to join the WNC Affordable Housing Loan Fund. That's a fund that Self-Help Credit Union is administering. It gets funding from other sources. It's a collaborative effort to move forward and promote affordable housing opportunities in Asheville. We are going to recommend there be an allocation of $10 million of bond funds to that affordable housing loan fund. Again, that'll get a lot of discussion in the HCD committee. And then finally in August, we're going to review the HCD work plan with that committee. And I have one other item, and I'll come to you real quick, Mayor. We are also not on the August 19th agenda, but one item we do plan to add is we want to add an MOU between the City of Asheville and the Asheville-Buncombe Continuum of Care to establish the City of Asheville as the lead entity, which is in alignment with HUD requirements and the Continuum of Care Charter. So Mayor, any questions?
We've gotten a couple emails asking us to slow down with regard to some planning around affordable housing planning. But what do, I don't know if you've seen it, we got one from Susan Bean and a couple other housing advocate folks. What item would that be focused on? Do you know?
Well, yeah, we'll discuss that, or the committee will discuss that. They'll begin that discussion at their July 30th meeting, and then they'll follow up on that discussion with their August 19th meeting. So a lot of opportunity for the HCD committee to consider that community feedback and include that as part of their discussions.
But is that focused on item number 3? I'm looking at the agenda. Item number 4, both of those? Both of those items?
It's both. And I think what staff is bringing to the committee is consistent with what's already been stated as priorities and use and focus areas for the bond funds.
Okay. I'm assuming whatever HCD produces is usually good work. So I assume that'll address that concern maybe. I don't know. I was a little surprised to see that feedback because usually people don't tell us to slow down when it comes to housing stuff, but
Councilwoman Roney.
I just wanted to add that the email requests that we're getting include requests for the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee to reconvene. So that's part of the equation is making sure that there's, community engagement and people bringing their professional and lived experience to the table so they can share the work with us.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move to PEDE next. For that item, we have a number of of items scheduled for the August meeting. I am going to cover, at the end, I'm going to cover one additional item that will be added to the agenda before we get to August 19th. So I'll start with, at our July meeting, we had an update from the Asheville Downtown Association, and they proposed a number of activation strategies for the downtown area. One of the things that staff was asked to do is to bring back some information related to the ADA proposal. And so our first agenda item, we'll have Dana Frankel, who's our downtown projects coordinator, presenting findings related to the feasibility and impacts of those strategies requested by the ADA. So we'll have an information sharing opportunity to talk about, from staff's perspective, some of our findings and feasibility analysis of those proposals. We're also going to talk about the Urban Land Institute. Steph Dahl and Nikki Reed have done a lot of work to pull this together, and they have done incredible work in a short time frame. They'll be back to PED in August, really to debrief the ULI process and to talk about future public engagement opportunities, proposed recommendations and next steps. So we want to come out of the ULI work with momentum and continue to move that forward. So we'll have a conversation about what that could look like to build off the week we're going to have. Councilman Mosley.
Hey, actually, my comment is related more to the discussion regarding downtown that PED will have. I watched the last PEDE meeting, and it seems as though what's being proposed would require an ordinance change. And I'll remind council that when we had our work session with Bo Mills, in our breakout room, we learned that staff's recommendation was that we pause ordinance changes until a potential plan could be in the works. So immediately what I thought of when I heard that was, does that mean the request from, I'm not even going to call them legacy neighborhoods, I'm going to say historically Black neighborhoods, their request for overlay was going to be put on pause. So I just want to point out that this would be a departure from what the normal plan would be. I just want to bring that to folks' attention because I suspect folks hadn't thought of it in that light, especially since a portion of, the South Slope area used to be South Side. And so if their request is related to opportunity zones, that would fall squarely into the request that they previously made. Just pointing that out.
I'm a little confused, but maybe we can come back on that.
We will provide information in the follow-up report as to clarify and address timing and delays or whatever. I don't think as of yet that we have gotten specific direction as it relates to social districts. That is actually something that is planned in the future for Public Safety Committee to discuss.
Can I, so that agenda item on PEDE, that first agenda item, ADA proposed downtown activation strategies. I know that does include this request from the ADA around social districts that are tied to events. So they're kind of limited in time and space. Does that include other things too at this moment?
It does. It was really kind of twofold. There was the discussion around social districts, and I do want to flag that while Dana is presenting that, Brad's office is working very closely on the analysis of what that would look like from a legal perspective. The other piece was ADA proposed fee waivers and other types of strategies through our parking or transportation department. The idea of waiving fees, open streets. kind of looking at other ways to activate downtowns. The social districts was one part of it, but then the other part was how do we support downtown events? And what role could that look like? And what are potential incentives that we could consider that would, maybe encourage or subsidize additional downtown events? So that's the other piece.
Okay, that's helpful to know. That the other item I know we're getting some requests from downtown or from some folks in downtown is to change the noise ordinance to allow for additional events that require permits. And I understand there may be some consideration that'll get lumped in there. And I'm just flagging that because I don't want council to be surprised because we don't see that on this agenda right now, but I'm sort of expecting that it might end up there. Maybe not. Ben's got to work with Maggie Ullman on the agenda for the committee. One thing that I think is, while we're grappling with that request to increase the number of permitted events for shows, this would be for the noise ordinance. I have reached out to Brad about using this opportunity, if we do this, to also adjust the noise ordinance to address some of the problems that we're still seeing that the noise ordinance isn't very good at addressing. And, when we passed the noise ordinance, we knew that it was going to be kind of a trial and error thing. We knew we'd probably need to do some tweaking. So, we've gotten some complaints from some other areas of downtown that maybe we could change the noise ordinance to address better. Anyway, just kind of flagging that just as a heads up, not necessarily do a deep dive on this now, but just so folks don't feel like, hey, I didn't know you guys were going to be talking about the noise ordinance at PED. So just to know that I think that might come up. One question I have when the vice mayor is talking about overlays, addressing the overlay issue in legacy neighborhoods before making any further ordinance changes. When we had this conversation when we were doing the urban corridor increased density by right change, I heard a lot of information from staff about the challenges around creating such overlay districts legally, now that we're not allowed to downzone in any way. And I don't know what the other word I would use to describe it was, sort of effectively, I guess, within our zoning ordinance. Like, what would an overlay really mean? Would that mean you froze the zoning in neighborhoods in time while you change the zoning in other areas of the city? Would that constitute an overlay? So I appreciate the manager, Deborah's responsiveness and providing us some information, but I don't want us to get into another frozen moment in time where we can't move forward because we don't really understand how to do the thing that needs to happen first, or if it's even possible. And so, Deborah, I'm wondering, I don't know what I'm asking for, but I mean, I think we kind of need to understand, like, if you guys are going to consider some type of overlay districts, A, you can't do it. B, you can do it, but it's limited to this, this, and this. Or C, you could try this other thing that's not called an overlay district, but it gets you to the same place. I'm totally making this up. I don't know the answer, but I just want to revisit this because we need a path, or we're just going to be back to where we were sort of spinning before. So
Yeah, we agree, Mayor, that there are multiple things. There are multiple issues and questions, and there's things regarding, protection, viability of, I will say, legacy neighborhoods, and there are other items on our workload that there are concerns about. Well, how are you going to do all of this when we have identified these are our priorities for work to be done this year? So we're working through, how do we prioritize? How do we adjust? How do we respond to particularly you all's requests in terms of things that you all feel are priorities and you want us to work on. So we're going back and readjusting and trying to respond to those concerns. Like the noise ordinance, you know, a month or so ago was not a priority, and now I think we're saying that it is a priority. So we're trying to again adjust and see how we do that work for you all, and we will have something in the follow-up report on Monday. I believe it goes out Monday evening, or at the latest by noon on Tuesday, and we'll hopefully clarify the path forward for you. We appreciate your patience on this. Councilmember Ronnie?
Yeah, since this is coming to PEDE, it would just really help to understand which changes to the noise ordinance we're trying to make and why. Because from my perspective, it feels like we're trying to benefit one business while reeling in another. And I think that we need to make sure that we're applying tools fairly and equitably across the sector, especially because we're talking about businesses in the same district. And we have a new business also producing events downtown. So I just wanted to make sure that PED is aware of what information the full council is asking us to consider and make recommendations around.
And the geography and the zoning district, and it is a complicated issue and matter that we'll have to address. Councilmember Hess?
Yes, thank you so much for this conversation. I just wanted to clarify a couple things. The ordinance change, the way that I would like it to see, is not one business perspective or, you know, just benefiting that. We can incorporate the other venues that are downtown. And when you have, you know, almost $500,000 for each show in runoff spending to our local businesses, I would argue that these are economic drivers for all of our small businesses downtown. And then also, it's my understanding that when we updated the density in the corridors, we effectively did freeze dezoning in our historically Black/legacy neighborhoods. And that with the upcoming comprehensive UDO study plan, that we were going to really look at what we could do in a comprehensive way to protect those neighborhoods. But I don't feel like we should stall in spurring economic activity because we haven't gotten that UDO comprehensive study plan.
I was just pointing out an inconsistency. It was, we need to hold off on everything when these neighborhoods ask for it. But when another group of our constituents ask for something, and from what I understand, it seems to me that it's being brought to committee at the request of council members and not necessarily staff. Is that correct? Same thing with the whole noise downtown.
I would say we're working at both of those at the same time with the comprehensive study plan. And, being responsive to those folks and to our small businesses that are asking for economic activation.
And all I'm asking is that folks who have been making these requests now for decades actually have a seat at the table and their needs are being considered too, not instead of, but too. And I'll just go ahead and say, and normally I wouldn't say this, the protections that we voted on, I'm not sure they're protections. I'm not sure from a legal standpoint that what we did is viable, but we won't know until it's challenged. Deborah?
Councilmember Hess, did you have another comment or question? Let's see.
I think
see your hand still up.
my comment is just that understood Vice Mayor Mosley, and that was our attempt to being responsive and trying to work with our legacy historically Black neighborhoods. And we may not get it perfect every time, but we knew that we were moving towards this overlay. And so, and I hope that we can still get those protections for them.
I hope so too, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. Ben?
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. We still actually have another item on the PED agenda. Just to step back, Mayor, you are correct. We do intend to put the noise ordinance discussion on the next PED agenda item. That's not shown today, but again, that's because we're still planning the agenda for the 19th.
So thanks for that. That's what I suspected. I'm trying to sort through the comments that I'm hearing here today and thinking about staff and the direction we're giving to staff. To the Vice Mayor's point, I think not to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're saying is there's an outstanding request that the council is not meeting. And meanwhile, we're moving ahead with other council initiated changes. And Deborah, that is why I'm saying, could somebody please answer the question of whether this request is possible for us to meet? Can we do it? I mean, Brad has given us lots of information about the legal aspects of it. I've had many conversations with our planning director about the sort of policies at play. And I cannot answer the question sitting here today. Can it be done? And if it can, how can it be done? And I'm just flagging this because I don't want to continue to be in a position where there's an outstanding request that we are not meeting when we very well could be.
And possibly, is the solution then, if it can't be done, but apparently it could be done in the last instance as it relates to flag lots, do we need to get to an understanding that every time we make a change to the ordinance, we'll go ahead and include a map like we did and possibly expand that map? Since it worked in that one instance, are we saying it could work in every other instance? Is that a possible solution?
Right. And I think one of the problems we ran into last time was, while it does for flag lots because of the way we made the change, I think what Brad was saying was when we did the higher density corridors, because it was changed within zoning districts, it was more challenging. I don't remember the exact thing. And I don't know if we need like a full-blown work session on this. I don't, or if staff needs to sort of get together internally and sort through what they think is the way to go at this. Right. So to your point, Vice Mayor, is it something that we just like every time we make a change, we address the concern at that time? Or is there some way to sort of holistically put in place something that's just there whenever we make a future change? So I don't know, but I just don't want this moment to slip by where we think we all have some common understanding about what the next steps are, and then we're right back here having this conversation again because we're not real clear on it. So that would be helpful.
Duly noted. We will get you some information next week early. Brad?
I apologize for adding on to this, but just to try to cap this with one additional point of importance. A lot of the things that the city was considering that might put in place some of the protections that we'd contemplated were somewhat derailed in the wake of the legislature's adoption of a new statute, which prevented us from doing what's called downzoning, as you will recall. A lot of the tools that we had at our disposal to place these sorts of protections might have likely fallen into that category. So that is something we've been watching closely as the General Assembly is considering a bill right now to perhaps reverse that. So that is some of the rationale behind what looks like a delay, but it's really us watching what's happening at the state level, because that will go a long way to defining how much power and flexibility we have. Right now, the legislature is still in session. They're currently on recess, but they're supposed to be back soon. I'm still hopeful that a bill that was passed in the Senate now is in the House might move forward and give us that ability. And I'll certainly keep council updated, but that's been one of the issues slowing things down a bit.
Okay, last PEDE agenda item. We're going to have James Shelton at the meeting in August to give an update on implementation of CDBG DR Small Business Support Program. So he'll give a broad overview of DR and the economic funding that's available, and then we're going to drill down on what that could look like for small business support. So again, very, very exciting news in the recovery landscape. Just another element of funding and programmatic opportunities that we're bringing forward to council for consideration. So that concludes my review of the PED agenda. Any other questions? Okay, I'll move real quickly into the 8-week agenda item. I've got 3. Again, we don't have as many meetings because we reduced the number in the summer, but 3 things I want to cover. At your August 26th meeting date, you will meet as the Policy, Finance, and Infrastructure group. You will have a work session meeting at 3 p.m. So you will start on August 26th at 3 p.m. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about recovery initiatives. That'll get covered at your agenda briefing for the August 26th meeting. So you'll see the PFI agenda next time. We are also going to have James Shelton on the 26th to review the newly updated Bowen report. That was originally done 5 years ago. We've got updated information and data, so we're going to get to council to provide an update on that report. I know CED has plans to share that information throughout the community, so more to come on that, but we're excited about that new report. And then finally, they don't show yet, but there's a number of rezonings that are in the pipeline. So I fully expect as we build out this calendar, you're going to see 3 or 4 more rezonings at your future meetings. So any other questions on the 8-week agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move to other issues and updates. We have Jessica Morris here today, our Assistant Director of Transportation. And Jessica, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kick us off on the next item.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon, council members. I am going to shortly turn this over to Ricky Anguera from our consultant team, which is Jarrett Walker and Associates. This is one of our first presentations that we will bring forward to you over the next several months with regard to the transit comprehensive operational assessment that we're doing. We kicked off this project in early April, and since then have been working with our consultant team to really dive into the details of our current transit system. And what Ricky is going to speak with you guys today about is kind of I call it kind of a transit 101, that we're looking at our current network and how can we take our existing resources and allocate them. And there's a lot of different ways that that can be done. And so he's going to talk through some of these initial conversations that we're having internally, but also having with many of our stakeholders who are working both on our working group and our stakeholder committee. So we've had a lot of early public input and engagement at where we are with this process right now. And that will continue after this phase. So I'm going to turn it over to Ricky, and he's going to share his screen, and then we will be available for any questions that you guys might have.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, City Council, for having me here today on your very busy agenda and taking some time to talk to me about transit. So who I am, my name is Ricky Anguera, and I work with a company called Jarrett Walker and Associates. And what we do is that we go from city to city throughout the country and throughout the world to help different cities think about their transit networks and make sure that the transit network that you have aligns with the goals that the community has for transit. Now, the purpose of today is to tell you about the COA, tell you about the process and what we need to think about together as we go through this process. And very importantly, I want to talk about how we want your input, because there's going to be a key point in a few months when we're going to be asking you all to give us direction on how we should proceed with the draft plan for this project. So first, what is the COA and why are we doing this now? Well, the purpose of the COA is to look at the existing network, to analyze the performance of the existing routes, and to take a look at the land use to determine the market and potential needs for transit. And through that process, make sure that the transit network that you have aligns with the goals of what you want transit in Asheville to do. Why are we doing this study now and why is this happening? Well, basically because the world has changed a lot in the last few years. You had an increase in service in 2020, and since then you've had a decrease in ridership. A lot of that has been because of the pandemic, and you also had Hurricane Helene last year. And so the way that people move around your city and the way that it's happened throughout the country in many places is that travel patterns have changed a lot. And so this is a good signal to tell us that it's a good time to take a holistic look at the transit network. And so the purpose of this is to take a look at the network today and make sure that it aligns with the goals of what you want the transit network to do. And in thinking about what the transit network could do in this post-Helene, post-COVID time, we need to think about what the goals of transit are. A lot of times you hear a lot of people talking about ridership because ridership is an important goal associated with transit, but it's important to talk about what it means to design a network to get high ridership. If you want to get high ridership, what you need to do is design a network that is as useful as you can make it to as many people as possible. And the way that you do that is by designing a network that has high frequency lines that are focused in the places in the city that are the most dense and the most walkable, because that is how you bring the most useful destinations within a reasonable amount of time of as many people as possible. And so let me talk about each one of these because these are important. Frequency always comes first. Frequency is extremely important when we're talking about the usefulness of transit service. Because when we're thinking about travel time in transit, it's not just the time that you spend in the vehicle, it's also the time from when you want to start a trip. So it's the time that it takes to walk to a bus stop, to wait for the bus, and to ride transit to get to where you're going. So the waiting time for a bus is very important. And if the bus is more frequent, then you wait less. Frequency is really powerful at making transit more useful because it does three things really well. It allows you to wait less for a bus. It makes connections easier because you wait less for that second bus also. And it improves reliability because if a bus breaks down, there's another one coming soon. So we instinctively know that frequency is really important, but we also see it in the data. This chart shows the relationship between frequency and ridership in 45 cities throughout the country. And Asheville is here with those orange dots. Those are individual routes in your network today. In this chart, the x-axis shows frequency. So it's the minutes between buses. The further you go left means the higher the frequency, the better the service. And the higher you go up means the higher the ridership. But not just ridership, but ridership relative to cost, which we call productivity. And what we see is that throughout the country and in your network too, higher frequency services tend to get higher productivity. And there is an upward curve, which means that you get better than linear payoffs for ridership when you provide higher frequency. So frequency is extremely important and we see it in the data. But it's also important to take a look at the land use because frequency and transit in general doesn't work equally well everywhere. And one of the most important things for land use is looking at the density. Imagine these two neighborhoods where you have a bus route that is identical on both, but the one on the top has double the number of houses than the one on the bottom. So without knowing anything about the people that live here and what they think about transit, the one on the top has double the number of potential customers for transit, double the number of potential riders. So density can be really powerful for just getting more people to ride transit and for making the transit network more useful. Density is important, but it's also important that people can actually walk to bus stops. So walkability is the next factor that's really important. Imagine these two areas where in the center of each circle, there's a dot that represents a bus stop. And the circle around it is a 1/4 mile from that bus stop. The shaded streets inside here are the places from where you can actually walk a 1/4 mile to get to that bus stop. Any connected street network like you have in downtown Asheville or West Asheville, it's very easy to walk to that bus stop from almost anywhere within that circle. But in a disconnected street network like down here, you can't get there from everywhere. You might live in a place down here at the bottom right where you're physically very close to the bus stop, but if you actually wanted to walk to the bus stop, you have to walk much more than a 1/4 mile. So it's important that places are connected and walkable. And it's also very important that people can actually cross this street, because transit works in both ways. And if you can't cross the street, then that means that you can take the bus from your home to the supermarket, but you can't take it from the supermarket to your home. So walkability and crosswalks are really important when we think about transit. We've looked at all of these things for your city. We've looked at a lot of different density parameters. This is looking at residential density in this map, but we looked at job density, low income density, minority density, and all kinds of factors that we put into a report that we call the choices report. And that is on the project website. You can download and see all of the existing conditions analysis that we've done. We also looked at walkability. So we looked at street connectivity. We looked at sidewalk and crosswalk conditions, and many other factors that go into thinking about what are the market's needs for transit in your city. So that's what you would do if you want to get high ridership. If your goal is to get high ridership, you would follow that recipe where you have high frequency service that is focused on the most dense and walkable places in Asheville. But at no point in this study am I going to tell you that you should want high ridership, because ridership is just one goal, and there is an opposite goal called coverage. And it's also an important goal. And so that brings me to the ridership coverage trade-off, which I want to take some time to explain, because that is the bulk of what we're doing in the study and the bulk of what we're going to be asking you all to make a decision about. Imagine this little fictional town. In this town, the lines are streets and the dots are people and jobs. You can see that most of the activity is concentrated on just 2 streets. So about 70% of the people live on just those 2 main quarters. We have 18 buses, and we're going to design a transit network here. If you ask me to design the network, the first thing I would do is to ask you what the goal is, ask you what you want transit to do. If you tell me ridership, and you tell me that the goal is ridership alone, I would design a network that follows that recipe that I was talking about before, and I would design a network that looks like this. I concentrate all that service on just the 2 main quarters where most of the people and jobs are. And in doing so, because I only have 2 routes for those 18 buses, the buses come very frequently. So in this network, you can imagine that the buses here come every 10 minutes. And they provide really good service to the people that live on those 2 main quarters, so 70% of the people in this town. The people there would find the service very useful because they don't wait a long time for a bus, they can transfer very easily, and they can reach many destinations within a reasonable amount of time. So in this network, because a lot of people would find the service useful, you would expect a lot of people to ride transit. And that's why we call a network like this a ridership network. You would get very high productivity, very high ridership relative to cost. But this network doesn't go everywhere. Down here in the southeast lives Mrs. Jones, and Mrs. Jones doesn't live close to any transit service. If you want to provide service to Mrs. Jones in the southeast, Mr. Smith in the northeast, and to everybody in every little corner of this town, then maybe what you want is not ridership. Maybe what you want is coverage. And if the goal is coverage, I would design a network that looks like this. You spread the service out. So instead of 2 routes, you now have 10. But in spreading it out, you're also spreading the service out thinly, which means that the buses here only come once an hour. And if the service only comes once every 60 minutes, that means that not a lot of people are going to find it useful, because not everybody has time or patience in their day to be able to use a 60-minute route. And so in this network, you would not expect a lot of people to use service. You're going to get some people to use it, and they're going to be very grateful of the service that you have, but you wouldn't get a lot of people. So you would not get high ridership. But that's okay, because the goal of this network is not to get high ridership. The goal of this network is to provide high coverage. And that's what it's doing. It's going to as many places as possible to provide a little bit of service. to as many people as it can. So both of these networks are important, but it's important to note that they lead in opposite directions. You can't do both with the same dollar. The more that you do of one, the less you do of the other. So it's important to think about what each one of these mean. If you're going for a ridership goal, then that would be thinking like a business. You're choosing the markets where you enter to try to get the highest ridership that you can. Because you get higher ridership, it's a lower subsidy per passenger, and you'd be able to support dense and walkable development, which is a lot of what your comprehensive plan suggests that you should do in the future. And it also aligns with all the sustainability goals, like reducing vehicle miles traveled and reducing emissions, because the environmental goals come from people actually riding transit, not just transit existing. If you're going for a coverage goal, that would be providing access for all. And who could be against providing access for all? You would be supporting suburban low-density development, and you'd be providing some sort of lifeline access to as many people as you can, regardless of where they live and how expensive it is to provide service to them. And you'd be providing service to as many neighborhoods and places as you can in the city. So both of these goals are mathematically opposite. You can't do both with the same dollar, but it is a spectrum. These are the opposite ends of a spectrum, and every transit network is somewhere in the middle between these. And so what we want to talk through in this study is about what the right balance between these goals is appropriate for Asheville. And that is eventually what we're going to be asking you all to decide on. Now, it's a very difficult decision because neither one of these is objectively the best answer. Neither one of these is technically correct, because it depends on the goals and what you want transit to do in your city. And so because it's such a hard decision, what we're going to be doing in the next phase of this project, and what we're starting to do right now, is to develop conceptual alternatives of what the network in Asheville could be with your current resources. What would it look like if you focus on ridership, or what would the network look like if you focus on coverage? And so with your current resources, your total number of buses, your total number of hours that the bus is on the street, we'll design these two contrasting alternatives, these two concepts. And with those concepts, what's happening next is that we're going to go to the public and we're going to ask the public what they think between the two. We're going to show them the concepts, show them how they compare to the existing network, and ask the public if they prefer one versus the other, if they lean towards one, lean towards the other. And we're going to be doing an engagement phase for 4 weeks, starting around the end of September. And early in that engagement period, we want to come back to you all. We're going to come back to City Council at one of these agenda briefing meetings and show you all the concepts and show you all what we're presenting to the public. So to make sure that you all understand how each of those concepts compares to the existing network and how they are different. Then when we close the engagement period, we will summarize the engagement results and we will show those to you. And then we will be looking to you all at your City Council meeting on November 11th to make a decision on where we should go between ridership and coverage for the future of transit service in Asheville. What the balance should be when we go into the draft plan phase of this project. It won't be the final plan. We will have another engagement phase later with the draft plan, but we will ask you all to give us direction on what the balance should be for us to design the draft plan for this study. Now, I know that was a lot, and you've already had a pretty long meeting, but I'm happy to take any questions and answer any concerns that you have. Thank you for your time.
Councilmember Horner.
Thank you, Ricky, for this report and update on where you're at. I'm unsurprised that I see a lot of duplicated conversations from the recent transit study that we did back in 2018, where we're having the same conversation. Sometimes it can be good to have a revisit to those same conversations. One of the things that I appreciated that you presented to us is the coverage goal and the trade-off with ridership, because here in Asheville, we are concerned about geographic equity. It's a bit of a chicken and an egg, just because as a transit rider, I'm standing on the side of an interstate with no sidewalk and not alone doing that. doesn't mean that we should remove the service from neighborhoods that have been historically underinvested in. I imagine we'll end up needing a hybrid because we're responding to historic land use and resource mapping. So a goal of high coverage matched with affordability is certainly a priority for me, connecting land use and our existing affordable housing, but also our plans for future affordable housing, as well as connecting living wage employers. So for example, the Inca Candler circulator that's suggested in the last transit master plan is still very much a need, but especially now that we've put investments into building essentially like a 700 unit new neighborhood that would be on that route. And there are new living wage employers on that potential future route that doesn't exist yet. So I know that's certainly a priority for me. What peer cities are we looking at that focus so heavily on tourism and connecting businesses with employees and customers is surely part of that equation. With our airport growing so quickly, it does kind of blow the mind that our transit service to the airport is only every 90 minutes. So I also wondered if when we're researching peer cities, what are the tourism rooted cities that we're looking at and how do they address those problems with commuters?
Yeah, no, great thoughts. It's, the trade-off between ridership and coverage is not easy. Because in a lot of those hard to reach places that you're mentioning, there's a high need for transit. And so if you were to provide service there, you'll be providing coverage. But because the land use is not very favorable for transit, then you would not expect to get very high ridership in those places. And so as long as you're making that decision consciously, then that's perfectly fine. But that's why it's important to go through this process and thinking about ridership versus coverage. So yeah, those are very good thoughts. In thinking about peer cities, we did look at a couple of different cities just to see how you vary in terms of the level of investment and the relevance of transit in your city. You have very high relevance in your city compared to a lot of other cities. You have pretty good investment, but it's time to think about the network and think about it holistically. A similar city that I think you can look at where we did a very similar process is Knoxville, just across the mountains from you all. I did a study just like this in Knoxville that was implemented in August of last year. And we went through a very similar process where we showed conceptual alternatives of what the network could be. We went to the public, and from the public, we heard what they wanted on that balance. We took that to the board in charge of making decisions, and they gave us direction on where we should land between ridership and coverage. And because we went through that process, they were able to implement. And in their network in Knoxville, they decided to lean more towards ridership, which meant eliminating service from some places, but with the goal of getting higher ridership. And a year later, I was looking at the ridership report last month, they have gotten an increase of 18% in ridership because they decided to focus on ridership. Now, I'm not saying that you should do what Knoxville did. What I'm saying is that going through this process can be really useful so that we make sure that we design together a network that works well for the goals of what you all want here in Asheville.
Hi,
Councilmember Turner. Maggie, or if you could wait just 1 minute so Councilmember Turner could go.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Maggie. I guess I have a couple questions. For me, we could, if this is all of the information we'll get, then I'm a little concerned we won't be able to make a logical decision. It would be more of a, how do we feel we need to respond? And I'm wondering if there is any additional stuff coming in the study that might point to how transit systems are traditionally funded. Does increased ridership equal greater grants that could then expand routes? Like some of that context, I feel like is going to be critical to understanding. I was hoping to get some of that. It is a little chicken and the egg for me because I do believe greater ridership equals greater revenues, not just in pass and swiping at the bus loading, but also in federal and state grants. So some kind of modeling around that would really help. And then additionally, I didn't hear any mention of, so let's say we did go focus on ridership numbers and smaller zones. There are alternatives in other cities under the term microtransit, I don't want anybody to panic, but where you send different types of vehicles to those far-ranging places because ridership is lighter there. So you're still addressing all the residents, but with a different mechanism. Is any of that going to be coming through as part of this study? And will it be shared with the community for more context, et cetera? Thank you.
Yeah. Let me tell you a little bit about microtransit. If you sometimes hear it being called all demand responsive, microtransit, those are all synonyms for similar type service. Is when you call or use an app to get a ride, someone to pick you up at your home and drop you off at a specific destinations. Now, those type of services are a coverage tool. They're a coverage tool because you can never, because they have limitations on the number of people that they can move. So you would never expect to get high ridership relative to cost. And if you think about what a microtransit driver is doing, is that he's picking up someone at a specific place, dropping them off, going to the next person, pick them up, drop them off. So it's very similar to a taxi service. And if you think about what a taxi driver can do, they can only move about 4 people an hour at the very most. So microtransit service will never get you more than 4 rides in 1 hour, just because of physically what the driver is able to do. There's very few passengers per driver. And when we talk about transit, the main cost is operating costs and the time that the driver is actually driving the vehicle. And so microtransit can be a good coverage tool, but you can never expect it to get very high ridership. And if we're thinking about your current budget and the money that you have to allocate transit, you're always making a decision between ridership and coverage, because if you're moving something to a driver to go and run microtransit service, that's a driver that is not running ridership. And so that could be an option if you decide to invest heavily in coverage, but you will not get high ridership relative to cost system-wide because of the resources allocated to coverage.
Thank you. And I guess, that sentiment is similar in my brain when we get to budgeting. So for example, this fall, we are closing down several of our parking decks in downtown to rehab them because the deferred maintenance had grown so far and so expensive, they had to be shut down. And that deferred maintenance equaled about the total of 7 or 8 years of the parking fund supplementing transit. And had it not been giving $1.5 million a year to transit, we would have upkept our decks. So there's so many layers here. And then, every year this council has some projects they really wish we could throw new money at, but we are taking $10 million in general funds to support transit. So everybody wants great transit. I don't think we'll have anybody on our staff or council say, and I imagine we all want to help as many people as possible. For me, it's getting down to the math. And that's what I'm really hoping to understand from this. How do we grow the system? If, we know half our fleet is I don't know if it's expired or way past useful life or what the terminology is, but we need buses. We need different buses. There's so many wish lists. And the pace at which we're going and the revenues that support it are not sustainable currently. So I'm hoping to really gain some knowledge on financial structures that could grow all of the transit program without leaving us dry for other programs.
Okay. I'm really glad that you said that everyone here wants a better transit network, because what we're focusing on now is defining what your definition of better is. Because regardless of what level of budget you have, whether you have less than today, the same, or whether you have more, it's still important to talk about what the goals for transit are so that we can have a clear conversation about how we design a transit network, regardless of whether you have a bigger budget and you have more money for it. Because ultimately it depends on what your definition of better is and what we want to do. So that's the initial focus of this study, to think about within your current level of resources, what your goals are and how the network can be thought of.
I think Maggie was waiting too.
Yes.
Councilmember Allman.
Maggie, did you have a question?
She's coming.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can now.
Great. I was curious, and I know, well, let me back up and say, I'm really excited we're going to have this conversation. As Kim mentioned, we did do a bunch of work in 2018, but things look very different now post-COVID, and land use has been, we've been pursuing, for 7 years of our land use goal through the comp plan. So I think it's appropriate to revisit. And I really like the framing of let's get clear on what where we want to go. My question is, if you had to assess our current system now, what does it look like our goals are? Like which direction does it seem like our design is doing?
So thinking about the spectrum that I was talking about, ridership versus coverage, I would say that your existing network leans towards coverage. There are certain inefficiencies and things in the network that we can improve upon as part of this project, regardless of where you land on the spectrum of ridership versus coverage. But today, for the level of resources that you have, I would say that it leans towards coverage.
Okay. And then it could be nice to understand if that's the goal that we continue with, what are the metrics of success? Like, are we doing a really great job with coverage right now? Like, how is it performing given that's been our standing goal for the last 7 years? And kind of what would those changes be? And, you know, we don't need to dig into this. I realize today's a kickoff call with just really setting the table for where we're going to go. And I know that there's a really dedicated steering committee of community members who are digging in, but understanding kind of what's our current performance, if that's our current goal. Is it working? Are we achieving what we set out to do 7 years ago would be helpful too.
Well, in your network today, you are providing pretty good coverage to a lot of places within the city. You're meeting most of the needs and places in a lot of places in the city. Not everything, but you are meeting quite a few. But there's still certain inefficiencies that if you decide to keep the current balance that you have today, there are certain things that we can improve. You can schedule the route so that you have higher frequency on some corridors to be a little more efficient, something you don't do today. You can also schedule the routes to all come to the transit center at the same time so that it's easy for people to transfer and then continue out. You do a little bit of that today, but those are things that we can still improve upon, even if you decide that your current balance of what you're doing today is appropriate. And going through this exercise can be really valuable because if what you're doing today is something that leans towards coverage and you decide to do that in the future, then you all know not to expect ridership to be a measure of success for your network. Because your network is not designed to get high ridership. Your network is designed to provide coverage. So you should never assess the success of your network by ridership if you continue to do what you're doing today, or if you continue to keep the balance that you have today.
And isn't that ridership number something like 2% of our population overall?
No, it's way lower. But I wouldn't use that necessarily as a measure of just the percent of the population. It also depends on the total number of trips and just how useful the transit network is to moving people around. And so if you want to get high ridership, what you want to assess is the usefulness of transit service. And we can talk about that later in thinking about whether can people use the transit network to reach many destinations within a reasonable amount of time. And so that's why as part of the study, we won't do any ridership prediction. There's many factors that make ridership go up and down, like gas prices, the economy, pandemics, and other things. So instead, what we are going to measure is people's access to jobs and access to opportunities within a reasonable amount of time. We're going to be measuring not what people will do, but instead what people could do. And by increasing what people could do, we can make the transit network as useful as we can. And that can lead to higher ridership.
Councilmember Hess.
Thank you, Ricky. This is very fascinating information. I just wanted to throw in my support as well for moving towards a more affordable and possibly even free of charge bus system. I know when I go to other towns and cities, they have sponsorship programs and temporary slides on the side of their bus or wraps that they partner with businesses, and they actually pay into the system. Just to your point, Ricky, they're getting folks to these businesses and to these events. And so I would really like to see if we could do that sometime in the future.
Yeah, I have a few things that I can say about that. When we're thinking about fares, and we're thinking about possibly making fares free, that obviously requires money, right? It's money that you would need to put into the system. And whenever you're putting money into the system, there's a trade-off that you got to think about. One is whether you want to make the fares free, or the other one is whether you want to improve the service. And with the same amount of money. And a lot of times what you see is that people value better service more than the actual fare itself. Because if the fare is free, but they can't get to their job within an hour, then the service isn't useful for them. And so a lot of people still feel okay paying the fare if they can get to their job in time. Now, that is a values question. I can't make the decision for you as the technical expert, but there's a trade-off to think about when you're thinking about free fares. And you mentioned advertising and bus wraps. Advertising can be a revenue source, and you can provide ads on your buses to get some of that. But I would advise you not to use full bus wraps because that is bad for the customer experience. If you're waiting at a bus stop and you're waiting to get into a vehicle that you can't see inside of, it doesn't feel very safe. And if you're on the inside and you can't see outside, it doesn't feel very safe either. And so having the windows be transparent is very important. If you do ads, I encourage you not to do full bus wraps.
We're not allowed to anyways here.
Great. Any other questions? Jessica, I know you probably were going to do this, but Chris, you want to introduce yourself to us?
Hi, everyone. My name is Christopher Whitlock. I am the new Transit Division Manager. It's my first time here, so nice to see you all.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Welcome. Happy to have you.
Thank you.
I thought you were with the study group. Hello.
I just want to say thank you to Chris, and one of the ways that I've really appreciated Chris's showing up is we've been doing these travel trainings with AARP in hopes that more people will feel welcome in riding the bus and know how to ride the bus. We have another one coming up on Tuesday. And so we're going to neighborhoods like Gibbons State and inviting neighbors to go to lunch, and AARP is making that possible as a partner. But the city transit staff has been so helpful too, and just getting materials ready so people know how to read a transit map, how to catch the bus, how to get off the bus. And so thank you to the staff for helping with that. I know there is one other advocacy point from the community that hasn't necessarily been addressed yet, that's been touched on, and that's the fare free. Taking people's money costs money. So when we're looking at apps that cost $250,000 or printing passes, what the barrier is for folks when they can't get on the bus, printing tickets, etc. I just want to make sure that we are still in fact going to look at the cost of taking fares, in addition to potentially moving towards a fare-free system, which was committed to as part of the COA.
You can take a look at your internal financials and see what that's like.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, Ricky. We really appreciate this was a very stimulating conversation, and we look forward to you all coming back after some of the public engagement and updating the council again. And I think, hopefully, Jessica, you've noted that, and I think this came from Councilmember Turner, that needed a little bit more information before we get to the point where you're asking them for direction. And I'm hoping that when you all come back, you will, as you say, you will have options. And even when you go out to the community, oftentimes we go out and we ask, what do you want? And if we're not able to deliver, that's hard. Again, and council knows, overpromise and underdeliver is not what our community hopefully is about. And so I want us to be very, very thoughtful about how we have those conversations with the community and engage them, and so that they are informed about cost benefit of either one of those approaches. So thank you, Jessica.
I was just gonna just say that the way this first phase of engagement is kind of designed or set up is kind of painful, right? You can't have everything you want. So we're going to show you these two ends of the spectrum so that folks can really understand if your pie is only so big, you can divide it into lots of tiny slices or bigger but fewer slices. But if we have this box that doesn't get bigger, then we need to decide how we want to allocate those resources. Additionally, we'll have a phase where we talk about, well, if we do want to have a little bit more, a bigger pie, what can we do with it? And still have those conversations about the trade-offs, because we can't serve everyone everywhere all the time, which I know everybody intuitively knows, but every time we talk about a new route, or why can't we just extend this route over here, or why can't we do later night service, or what have you, if our pie doesn't get bigger, then we're having a conversation about, well, who are we taking away from? And so that's a real, that's something that we need clarity from the council and direction. And that will set us up for future conversations as well about funding.
Exactly. That's where I was going, Jessica. There may be alternative ways that we need to fund a transit system. Even if we want to maintain existing service, we may have to consider that. Councilmember Ronnie?
I almost forgot. How are the transit committee members and ARTC advocacy groups engaged? Because they have such amazing reach and professional and lived experience in this process. And I know we're going to get an update at the meeting on Tuesday, but transit wasn't included in the advocacy groups that were to be brought back or have a path forward. And so that is a concern for me.
Yeah, I can comment on that. I think we've developed or brought together a great group of volunteers consisting of a few members from MMDC, from the Transit Committee, from ARTC, to be a part of this project as a working group. So they'll be able to review documents that we create and kind of participate in the project as we move along throughout the next year. I think most of them are actually with us this week in our core design retreat. So they're with us every step of the way, providing their feedback on the different challenges or the different types of service that we may lean towards, whether it's, coverage or ridership. So yeah, I think we definitely want to keep everyone involved as much as they can, so they can help us be able to communicate the project to the public.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
All righty then. Thanks for the robust conversation again. Mayor, is there anything else you want to close us out?
No, seems like we've got a closed session. So I think everyone
At 1 o'clock.
We'll have a couple of seconds to take a break, and we'll be back here at 1 o'clock.
Mayor, if I may, while we're in open session, we actually do need to have the motion read to go into closed session.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes, please.
Okay, here we go. So I move that the Asheville City Council go into closed session for the following reasons. 1, to prevent disclosure of information that is privileged and confidential pursuant to the laws of North Carolina or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute Chapters 143-318.11A1. The law that makes the information privileged and confidential is North Carolina General Statute Chapters 143-318 2.10e. And 2, to consult with an attorney employed by the city about matters with respect to which the attorney-client privilege between the city and its attorney must be preserved, including but not limited to the handling or settlement of a claim regarding to the following: the City of Asheville versus HCA Healthcare Incorporated, case number 1:CV:22-CV00114-MR. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute, chapters 143-318.11A3. Thank you, Mayor.
Excuse me, Councilmember Hess, I actually think there was one additional item, and for ease, I can read that if you will agree to add it to your motion. One additional item being Mile versus City of Asheville, case number 123CV 259 MRWCM. If you're okay with adding that to the motion, I think we can proceed to a vote.
Yes, sir.
Do we need a second?
You do.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Roll call?
Aye.
Maggie says we need a roll call vote, Mayor.
Don't we need a roll call vote on this, Brad?
Yes, I'm afraid you do for all virtual meetings.
Thank you.
Roll call?
Genroni, aye.
Oh,
Sage
okay.
Turner, aye.
You know what? All right, Maggie, I felt like I was at an MSD meeting because their clerk does the roll call, but I do the roll call. So, okay, so Vice Mayor.
Aye.
Okay, Kim Roney,
Aye.
Sage Turner,
Aye.
Bo Hess,
Aye.
Maggie Ullman, Aye, okay, and myself, aye. We got it. Okay, all right, so we're going to adjourn from the closed session. We'll see you there in just a minute.